Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, after recently looking at my energy plan in my home, I quickly learned, as the same as many of you listening out there will have found, that energy prices are going up significantly at the moment. And also at a time where we're all starting to think about green energy too. And this got me thinking, maybe it's time for a different school of thought and a different approach to how we consume energy. And I think many have the misconception, after years of bad service, that you just cannot have the best experience at the cheapest price point possible while also doing your part to the green energy revolution. You can't have all those three things. They just don't exist. But it's a myth. So I've invited Octopus Energy Founder and CEO Greg Jackson onto the podcast to explore how technology is actually reinventing the energy industry and leading the way with a customer-centric approach that also tackles climate change. And for years, the energy industry does have a reputation for running on software which is the equivalent of floppy disks. So I wanted to learn more about the application of technology in the industry and how Octopus Energy is actually trying to make the sector energy fit for a more environmentally and socially aware digital age. So we will talk about all this and how they're using technology to innovate in the space, all through their tech platform called Kraken. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to London so we can speak with Greg about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Greg. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
I'm Greg Jackson. I'm the founder and the CEO of Octopus Energy.
And one of the questions I always like to start with on the podcast is, especially with yourself here, with the world of technology and energy, how did you end up here? I mean, so can I ask you share your origin story, where your passion for tech came from, and ultimately what it was that put you on the path you're on today?
I'm part of a generation of very lucky people who grew up in the sort of 1980s, I guess, when the home computer revolution was happening. And, I got a Sinclair ZX Spectrum, learned to program that. I ended up leaving school when I was 16 to write games for it. So, that was a very early passion for tech. And it's never really gone away. I mean, until very recently, I've had a bit of spare time. You'd sometimes find me with a soldering iron and, just trying out some little bits of hobbyist experimentation. So tech's kind of written through me like the letters in Blackpool Rock.
I think we must be of a similar age because I too was from that era and the ZX Spectrum and spending 6 hours copying code from a book, possibly another couple of hours trying to solve the syntax errors afterwards and all the mistakes. But they were happy times, weren't they?
They were. Well, I'd saved up all the money from I did a paper round and a milk round and all that stuff. I saved up the money and bought this secondhand machine. It was already kind of not working very well, so I learned to solder early. But, another way of saving money was you'd sit in W.H. Smith, literally copying out the listings, the software from a magazine onto a notepad, take it home and then type it in. And that way you didn't have to spend, 99p buying the magazine. So it was fun and you had all the time in the world and you learned a lot by doing it.
Man, I'm glad it wasn't just me going down that route. I don't think, did anybody buy anything in Smith's back then? But of course, that path led you to Octopus Energy, which is described as Amazon of energy. And it currently serves, I believe, around 2.2 million customers with renewable and clean energy. But can you tell me a little bit more about how your technology enables you to do this cheaper and more efficiently than many of the others, including those big four that we hear about here in the UK?
Yeah, well, first of all, quick update. I think we now have about 2.5 million customers in the UK. And increasingly, we've got customers in Spain, Germany, USA, and we've got another up to 17 million customers licensed onto our technology platform in the UK, Australia, and other places. So, the company has achieved some degree of scale, although we've got so much further to go. And I think really what happened was I saw a whole load of things that were wrong with the energy industry. And, customers are being overcharged, they're getting terrible service. And you could see that technology could solve those problems. And then on top of that, the energy industry seemed to be dragging its feet on climate change. It would talk about green taxes rather than trying to find ways to deliver green solutions. And the observation really was energy's got two products, typically gas and electricity. And yet a typical UK energy company, similar picture around the world, was spending something like 14% of its revenue on overheads. Meanwhile, Amazon's got 300 million products and spends 2% of its revenue on overheads. And you kind of just go, like, there is the opportunity to change that sector through tech.
And speaking of that sector, I'm going to have to bring it up here, but the sector does have a reputation or a poor reputation as regards customer service and customer experience, etc. It almost feels like it's trapped in another world, the analog world at that. But one of the things that put you guys on my radar is how you're using technology to be the energy provider, but with the best customer experience too. So can you expand on how you're doing that and the role of technology in that?
Until companies like ours came along, ours in energy and others in other sectors, people thought there was a trade-off between customer service and price. They thought the only way you get a better service was by having higher prices so you could pay for more people to do the work. But the reality is, in a lot of sectors, and energy is certainly one of them, poor customer service was coming about because companies had outdated systems. So what you had was loads of processes were being done manually that should be done by a machine. And so not only does it cost a fortune, but it makes loads of mistakes. And all those mistakes end up leading to bad service. So by building our own platform that was able to automate a lot of what is done by people elsewhere, you're able to simultaneously cut costs and make the service better. And I think really then what we did was that we decided to deploy our brilliant people on top of the platform so that they can then provide outstanding service with the platform. It's called Kraken, by the way, our technology, with Kraken as the tool to deliver it. So in most companies, people are in the machine. They're a link in the chain. And here, the chain's pretty automated, and the people sit on top of it to deliver superb customer experiences.
And has anybody in the business, including yourself, ever used the line, release the Kraken? Someone's got to have done it, right?
I suspect that line was used the first day we named Kraken. Although I'm going to say that one thing I love about our company is this kind of decentralization. So when people ask me about where the name Kraken came from, I think it was this guy called Matt Davis who joined very early. And until then it was called The Platform. And he just called it Kraken one day and it stuck. And these days it's got its own logo, its own personality. And because we've got very creative people, I think there's over 100 Easter eggs built into Kraken for both customers and staff to discover.
Love that. And of course, other big topics right now are sustainability and climate change, especially in the energy industry. And on this podcast, I always try and bust a few myths and misconceptions. I'm sure you've heard a few of them already, but many people might have the assumption, for example, that clean energy is too expensive and inaccessible. I mean, can you expand on that myth, the myth of green energy being costly? Because that's what it is, isn't it?
You know what? We should be grateful to governments that kind of led the way on this by creating an industry in clean energy. They got enough scale that it is now cheaper to generate electricity renewably than it is from fossil fuels. In fact, it's now cheaper to start shutting down fossil fuel plants, and literally writing off those costs and move to green energy. So give you a couple of amazing numbers. I mean, the cost of generating solar electricity has fallen by roughly 24% per year for the last decade. That's incredible, right? It now costs around, 4.5 pence to generate electricity from wind. And today it probably costs, almost 10 pence to generate it from gas, right? So we're at this point when renewables are cheaper. But the key with renewables is they're only cheaper if we use them right. So, everyone knows that, one of the issues with renewables is that it's intermittent. Sometimes the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining. But let's understand the flip of that. There are times when it's abundant. It's like you've got masses of zero carbon, zero marginal cost, zero gilt, green electrons. And if we use them when they're abundant, then we can enjoy a clean energy future. So what we need to do is things like, electric cars. There's a lot of flexibility about when you charge the battery. If you get home, plug your car in and charge it at peak electricity times, you're going to be adding enormous load to a system. But if instead you just plug it in and leave it there and it automatically charges when we do have a lot of abundant, cheap renewables and demand is low, well, it's going to be cheaper than ever to get around in a car. And the same goes electric heating. Again, if our electric heating systems can automatically grab the electricity when it's most abundant and cheapest, and maybe slightly overheat the home ahead of a period when we haven't got so much, and then use the heat in the home for a little bit longer, and then kick back in once we've got more electricity again. Like that kind of automation, no one will notice it, but in the background, that is what will enable us to move to cheap green energy.
And I think if we've learned anything over the last 2 years, we're all starting to think differently, think smarter. And there's an argument that the crisis has actually been a great catalyst for innovation. So on the innovation side of things, can you tell me a little bit more about how you guys are innovating in the space through your Kraken tech platform?
So I think we were the first company to say, look, customers would love systems that automatically gave them cheap electricity when it was abundant and automatically did things like charging electric cars. Now, I don't know, 20, maybe 25% of UK electric car owners use Octopus Energy smart tariffs to do just that. Brilliant. We've proven it works. But I think we've got a lot to learn from the pandemic. The big thing during the pandemic, there were so many big things during the pandemic. One of the very big things in innovation was that what used to be a 15-year process for creating a vaccine, we shrunk down to, just a matter of months. And we did that because companies were sharing real-time data with regulators, and regulators were assessing it in real time. So instead of spending like 3 years building a trial program, 3 years running, and 3 years looking at the data, and it was all done in parallel and iteratively. We have to do the same now with energy if we're going to fight climate change at anything like the pace we need to do so. So today, energy is still far too slow to innovate. We can do all this great innovation, but if National Grid don't give us cheap access to the wires when they're empty, it's pointless. In fact, we lose money by innovating. And instead of getting great solutions out there fast to tackle climate change, we're ending up doing it in the same old way. So the pandemic has shown us how we can do this. We just now need to actually get on and do it.
So for people listening all over the world here, what you're saying essentially, it is possible to give customers the best experience at the cheapest price point, while also driving the green energy revolution, because I think that's something that people have always thought wasn't possible. So can you walk me through or expand on how you do that for your customers from both the green energy revolution and the price point and customer service too?
Yeah, of course. Look, by the way, we've seen this in sector after sector. Yeah. I remember when physical retailers said our sector can't go online, clothing can't go online because people need to try it on, or whatever it would be. It's all gone online. And I remember when it would take, a week to get something delivered. And now with, Amazon Prime, I can get it in a few hours. In fact, with, Getter, you can get it in a few minutes, right? So what happens is technology is astonishingly good at optimizing systems. If something is possible in principle, technology makes it possible in practice. And so in energy, look, I talked earlier about this idea that green electricity is cheaper to generate. What we now just need is the routes to market to let people benefit from that cheap electricity. And fundamentally, I think what Octopus is doing is saying at every stage in the supply chain, if it can be done better through tech, we'll do it. So we've recently acquired enough renewable generation to supply 1.5 million homes. And we're going to be putting the same tech, the same flexible, machine learning, artificial intelligence technology into generation as we currently have in consumption. So you imagine we've got a wind farm, and for every single turbine on that farm, we're able to get a real-time forecast of how much electricity it's going to be able to generate over the next few days. And then in real time, we're deciding, is the electricity from this windmill going to be used to charge that car's battery? Are we going to wait, because we know there's going to be more wind in a few hours, to charge that car's battery? Or do we take the wind we've got right now and use it to make some hydrogen? Use that hydrogen, we can then look, are we going to ship that hydrogen to a local industrial user, or maybe use it for aviation or heavy goods, or turn it back into electricity in 3 days' time? Now, joining up the data to make that possible is the path we're on. And I think the closer the connection between what's going on in the world of renewable generation and renewable consumption, understanding people's driving habits and how much electricity they're going to generate on their solar panels, all that stuff lets us squeeze as much out of this system in terms of cost and waste as we've squeezed out of transport with Uber, out of retail with Amazon, and so on.
And I think we are starting to see a more environmentally and socially aware consumer out there that do turn their back on brands that aren't sustainable and not living up to their promises around climate change, etc. So I'm curious, do you think energy companies that fail to address these points, are they going to eventually fall out of favour with customers who want to look to a brand that's going to be making a difference?
You know what? I mean, I can't blame anyone for this.
Yeah.
In a world where people are financially hard-pressed, everyone's an environmentalist till it costs a penny more. The secret here is what we need to do is make the solutions that are important for tackling climate change the cheaper solutions, right? So we are unashamedly a company that believe in renewable energy and believe in cheap energy. Now, one of the things I'm most proud of is governments and businesses are absolutely leading the way. So we get pressure from business customers and from governments to say, how can we go renewable faster? That is fantastic. And there are some customers, some consumers who are hugely passionate about it, and some citizens. But if we're going to make it something that all citizens support, all citizens want, let's capitalize on the fact that renewables are cheaper by making them cheaper for citizens to buy.
And it does feel like this space is moving incredibly fast at the moment, and technology is really accelerating the pace of change there. But is there anything that excites you about how tech will continue to transform this space?
I think we have got so much opportunity to keep driving costs down. So to give you just one little example, right? Milk leaves the farm in the UK at about 68 pence, 0.68 GB pounds. And by the time it's in the supermarket, it's 1.09 pounds. So it's gone up by 50% between the farm and the shelf. And that 50% is paying for drivers to schlep up and down highways with diesel trucks, to use the most expensive refrigerated shelves in supermarkets. I think it pays for pasteurizing and bottling as well. Meanwhile, electricity leaves the farm, the solar farm or the wind farm, at 4.5 pence. And by the time it's in your house, it's 19. It's gone up by a factor of about 4. It's gone up by 300%, right? i.e., and all this has gone through some wires. We have got to cut the cost of that system in order that people can enjoy cheap renewables. So my massive passion at the moment, and I'm incredibly excited about it, is finding ways to cut the cost of the infrastructure that moves electricity around.
Oh, and your passion for that really comes through too. And we began today's podcast talking about your origin story, where that passion came from, what put you in here. But before I let you go, it's time to have a bit of fun with you now. I'm going to ask you if there's a particular song that's been the soundtrack to your career over the years, or a song just helps you get your head in the zone or reminds you of your role there. Do you have a song and a story you can share with us that we can add to our Spotify playlist? Is it going to be AC/DC or another energy theme band?
I like
Put
that.
me out of my misery.
Yeah, I mean, AC/DC is a bit soft for me. So I would go with Judas Priest, Breaking the Law. Right?
Wow.
And for those who don't know it, it's a fantastic bit of protest heavy metal, I think from the 1980s. And it's got some incredible lines, but it's got the like, you would do the same thing too. And I think it's got this deep understanding of what it is like to be outside the system and breaking the rules.
Wow, what a great choice. I'll proudly add that to the playlist. And for anyone listening that wants to find out more information about Octopus Energy, contact your team, whether they're a business or a consumer, what's the best starting point?
And the first thing is, look, follow me on Twitter, G__J. I know it's a terrible handle, but I should have chosen something better years ago, but that's at G__J. And that's a great place just to see, like, I tend to tweet and retweet the stuff the company is doing, the stuff that our team are doing, the stuff that customers are doing, that I think is interesting and inspiring. And for everything else, head to octopus.energy. That's octopus.energy, and that'll bounce you off to whatever part of our group is of interest to you globally.
Well, I'll add those links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. But I'd love chatting with you about how we can change perceptions around clean energy being expensive and inaccessible, and also busting that myth of green energy being expensive, and how you've smashed that with your technology, Kraken there. But more than anything, I just loved hearing about your story and how you got here and that passion that really comes through for the subject. So thank you so much for sharing that today.
Well, thank you for taking the time to listen to it. And look, if there's one message, it's that cheap energy can be green energy. We just have to use it right.
So, it is possible to provide affordable and clean energy to millions of people around the globe with a focus on customer experience. And I really enjoyed learning how the myth of green energy being way too expensive being smashed by Octopus's tech with Kraken there. But over to you, wherever you're listening to this podcast in the world, tell me about the energy sector where you are. The good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it may be. I'd love to hear your stories, experiences and insights, and we'll share it all on a future episode. And as always, you can get me by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, just @Neil C. Hughes. I'm the easiest guy in the world to find, so keep those messages coming in. But Greg has planted the earworm of Judas Priest in my directions, so I'm going to go and rock out for a bit, and I'll return again tomorrow with another great guest. So a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.